things.
That's I need to ask you that. What are we talking about? Are you talking about?
I'm fully following what's going on here.
I'm following it mostly,
yeah.
but what are you talking about as far as what we create versus what we destroy and
So
stuff?
so whether it's our ideologies, philosophies, religions, homes, businesses, buildings.
So you are talking about some physical things as well.
I'm talking about just about everything that a human can dream up is inherently flawed and self-destructive.
Okay.
That's because we're inherently flawed and self-destructive.
Okay. So you're saying...
So I'm saying if it's only us,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if it's only us figuring these things out, then it's going to be inherently flawed and self-destructive.
But surely you don't think that everything we make, while if you might work with the assumption that it's inherently flawed and self-destructive, but it also aspires to something, and like we have the desire for it to persevere,
For it to mean something.
or I mean just for it to exist. Like when you say self-destructive, I don't know what you mean, because when we build a building, yes, it's going to deteriorate over the time. That doesn't mean it's like self-destructive. It's just things deteriorate over time.
Right. It was self-destructive. Like there's nothing that's permanent that we make.
Something not being permanent, I don't think is the same as being self-destructive.
Okay, so if we're inherently flawed and self-destructive, okay, then everything that we create is going to be inherently flawed.
That's what I'm saying. I don't agree with the terminology.
Well, we can't. Okay,
I'm American.
Right.
Is everything I make American?
That's not the argument.
Okay, I'm hungry. Is everything I make hungry?
That's yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I make a guitar, it's
But
hungry.
I think it's the law of analogy. Everything that is necessarily creates something like itself.
I'm specifically worried about the term self-destructive, because like humans, while I don't even know where you necessarily come up with that. It's like,
Are you self-destructive?
I can be, but I can also not be.
Okay, but are you?
I can be, but I can also not be, and that's the problem. It's like you're kind of qualifying it as one thing more than
selfish?
another. Am I selfish?
Yes.
I can be, but I can also not be.
Right, but at the end of the day, like I'm not saying do you identify as I'm selfish 100% of the time?
Well, that's what it sounds like when you say it that way.
I'm saying we can't get away from our selfish tendencies, our tendencies to destroy things, whether by accident or intentional. It's a subconscious thing to want to look out for ourselves primarily, even at the cost of other things. And so it's necessarily self-destructive.
I'm sorry, man. I'm really trying to follow, but self-destructive and selfishness, that doesn't work at all for me, because like
It's the same thing.
No, because if you're trying to self-preserve, that can be selfish. Like I could hoard all the food for myself, and that could be really selfish, and maybe that would make people not like me. But that's not the same thing as being self-destructive.
Well, how is that benefiting you if you're hoarding everything and everybody else is suffering?
Well, then I would be like having all the food, having all the resources.
Yeah, but then you're alone.
It feels a little like you have to see the flaw in what has been laid out. You have to see what I'm saying.
No, you're inherently self-destructive and inherently flawed. And if you're hoarding all the food, then you're going to be hurting yourself, because you're going to be lonely, because either people want to kill you to take food so that way they can live, or they just don't want to be around you because you're a jerk and selfish.
I acknowledge that.
So you're destroying yourself by trying to preserve yourself at the cost of all relationships.
Okay, so you're using specifically the metric of relationships now.
I'm saying the metric of everything. We can't make anything perfect. We can't make anything permanent.
Okay, I think I understand what you're trying to get at. So you're saying that even if you think that your attempt to claim all the resources for yourself, like say food, even
you
if
can even use the World Trade Centers as an analogy here.
Well, hold on. If you're just tell me if I'm right or not. You're saying that even if you think I have the perfect idea,
Okay.
I'll keep all the food for myself, and
Okay.
then I won't be hungry, and that's selfish. But like that's what you're doing. But it still can't be considered perfect because it's at the expense of those relationships. So therefore, it can't. Like you're saying that there's no perfection.
You're still ultimately hurting yourself.
Okay, so you're saying because there's no perfection, you're for some reason using that to say that people are all self-destructive.
I just now used the word perfect. Otherwise, I've been using inherently flawed and self-destructive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So now you're jumping on the perfection thing. I'm saying that if you hoard all the food, then you're ultimately going to be hurting yourself because you're lonely. And because you can't. Okay, let's just use another example. Like I said, the World Trade Centers. Okay.
Okay.
The World Trade Center is going to be self-destructive to a certain extent. Okay, it's too tall, and they had to put in precautions, like it being able to move in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because it was so freaking tall. All right, so it's inherently self-destructive that they had to put in things to keep it from destroying itself or the wind doing it. Because if there's just even the slightest bit of like the bird lands the right way or ultimately it can just fall in on itself. So you have to build it a certain way, you have to engineer it a certain way, but then you have to put in sway bars basically. Okay, I know that's not the technical term, but it's inherently flawed. So that's why you had to put in safety precautions or whatever. But then it's self-destructive because the materials that you're using to make it deteriorate naturally. They just do.
I just don't agree with that use of the term self-destructive because that's not what it is. That's not colloquially what that term means. Deterioration is not the same thing as self-destructive.
Colloquially is irrelevant. The self-destructive means the same thing anywhere.
No, I disagree. And colloquially, I can't even say that word, but how people use words is a huge part of how we define them.
Right, but I'm using self-destructive, and it's pretty universal.
That's what I'm saying. I disagree.
Well, okay.
I don't know why we're still stuck on this, but like something that deteriorates over time is not the same thing as something that intentionally destroys itself.
I just think we speed up the process because we're selfish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think selfishness is inherently self-destructive.
That's fine.
Yeah.
If you say that, that's fine. But the analogy
how is selfishness not inherently self-destructive?
It's also self-preserving. That's the thing.
Right. Self-preserving of one person who wants to take care of only themselves for their own well-being.
Yeah, but that's
forgetting everybody else. So how is that not self-destructive? You're alone. You're hurting yourself by screwing everybody out.
It's just weird that you're like adding all of this context to it after you offer the premise, because it's like, is selfishness self-destructive? It doesn't sound like it, because selfishness also can be used to give yourself things that you need. But then you say, well, here's examples of the secondary cost of all that. And I agree with the secondary cost of all that. I agree that anything to that level
but that's
of
the
excess,
cost of selfishness.
but like selfishness also produces something else, and you're being very rigid about saying like all of these examples I'm given, they produce one single thing. But selfishness also produces, given the example that we gave, it could produce a wealth of resources
For one person.
And
right.
that in itself on its own, if you're the only person in the world and you take all of the resources for yourself, then it's not selfish anymore. Then you just have all the resources. It's not that it's not selfish anymore, but that second part that you're providing that is at the exclusion of all other humans, that part isn't there anymore. So like the very act of giving yourself things that you just want to indulge
if you take
in having,
then everybody dies, and then so there's.
I think you're being a little unwilling to see the flaw in your statements, if I'm being honest.
Okay, all right. So if this is on YouTube, right, in the comments,
okay,
I want to know how many people think that selfishness is a bad thing.
I will also add this. I'll add
purely
the question.
A bad thing.
I'll add the question to Instagram as well.
I don't even need a vote. Like if it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not.
But that's not what you said though.
Is selfishness a bad thing?
No, that's not the question.
That's what I just asked.
That you can ask that, and you're welcome to answer that. The question is selfishness does it produce purely self-destruction? Is it self-destructive in its nature?
Is selfishness self-destructive? Is that the question?
That's what I've been struggling with.
Put it in the reviews on the podcast, put it on Instagram in the comments, put it on YouTube in the comments. Is selfishness self-destructive?
Okay. All right. That's what we'll do.
Yeah. So if
I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Looking out, it doesn't matter what the vote is. It is looking out for numero uno inherently a bad thing? Because self-destructiveness, is that a bad thing? Can we agree that self-destructiveness is a bad thing?
You can't wiggle like that, though.
I'm not wiggling. I'm asking you if self-destructiveness is a bad thing.
Self-destructiveness, yes, is a bad thing.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that you can just say, since it's a bad thing, we can change the question to, is selfishness a bad thing? Because
I didn't say selfishness is a bad
I know. I'm just saying.
Because if selfishness is self-destructive, then selfishness is a bad thing. Ik pay atenlay A plus B equals C.
A plus B equals C?
Yeah.
Okay.
A plus B equals C.
Okay.
If selfishness is self-destructive and self-destructive is a bad thing, then selfishness is a bad thing. It's called a syllogism.
That's fine. That's fine. I think
let the commenters decide.
I want the commenters to remember that my position was, it is too simple to assume, like when you say that, does selfishness produce self-destructiveness? That is not. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm saying that selfishness doesn't only produce one thing. Selfishness also produces things like self-preservation. And that's all I've been trying to say.
Still selfish.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm just saying I think it's too narrow to look at it as something that only produces one thing when there's like an assortment of things it can produce given a different situation.
I didn't say it produced more than one thing. I said it was self-destructive.
Does it produce more than one thing, though?
I just said it was self-destructive.
Is it also self-preserving?
It's literally the definition of selfish.
Yeah. So is selfishness,
right,
in addition to being self-destructive, is it also self-preserving?
That's literally the definition, Tyler.
So do you mean yes?
No. Selfishness is self-preservation. That's literally the definition. It's not does it produce it? It is that.
Okay. Is self-preservation good?
No.
Okay. And that's where we will land.